Now we know how to generate NumPy arrays, how to perform certain manipulations on them. Would be great also to save them to files and also read the data from files to the arrays. And you may remember that we had to do loops and go over lines in the file, and this is too much hassle. So in NumPy you can do it much simpler. So let's say I have a data file. So let me create an empty file with data. So let me save it as, let's say, data file txt. Okay, and write some data in it. So this will start from a comment. This is a simple data file. I can leave one more line empty, and then let me put some simple data here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Oops. And 7, 8, 9. All right, so this is my data file, and I want to read it using NumPy. So I start with import NumPy as NP, and then all I need to do in order to read the entire set of data here in a single NumPy array is to use the loadTxt method. So I create an array. I'll call this array just data and say NumPy loadTxt. Then, well, it's Spider gives us a hint on how to use the loadtxt syntax. It actually has a number of parameters, but if you, by default, it's fine to give it just the file name, data file.txt. And well, in our case, since it's not only the data, but it's also these comments, we can actually say that we don't want to use the first couple of rows in these files. Skip rows equals 2. And that would be sufficient. So now if I print my data, well, it read these contents of the file to a NumPy array by default using the float 64. Actually, I could use a type for it. I could use, I think, the type equals int, if I'm not mistaken, and then my data would be an array of integers. All right, this is if we need to read the entire data. However, if you want to use just a part of your data, imagine if you had, I don't know, 20 columns and you don't care about all 20, but you need just a couple of them, you could use more options of loadtxt. For example, the use calls option. Let me show you how to do it. And also, let's say in this case we want to read it in 2 separate vectors, column 2 and column 3. And this will be NumPy loadtxt, the same data file, right? Data file.txt. And then the options I use use calls equals 1 and 2. If I want second and third column, the indices should be 1 and 2. And then I'm skipping the rows, the first 2 rows. And also I do unpack equals true, which will unpack the result in these 2 separate NumPy arrays. All right, so now my column 2 is an array and column 3 is an array. A little bit easier than doing a loop over all the lines and going line by line. It's so much simpler. So now let's say we read our data. So let me go back to the data. And we want to make some manipulations on the data. So let me create the new data array, which would be NumPy sqrt square root of my original data. Okay, so data. It actually converted when I used this as QRT, it converted it to floats, so all these numbers are floats. And what I want to do now, I perform some, well, as you see, very complex manipulations on these data, and now I want to save it to a new file. So for that, I need to use the method save.txt. So I do NumPy save.txt. Then first parameter here will be the name of the new file. Let me call it the new file dot txt. The second parameter would be the actual array of data. This is new data. And actually this would be sufficient. If I just do that, it will do the work. It will save my new data array to a file. Let's see that. And now let's open the file and see what I had in this file. So it's called a new file. Here it is. Okay, let me make the font a bit larger. It's exactly those numbers, except for, well, it is really in a very inconvenient format for a human being to read. So these things you can control in additional options of save.txt as well. Also, and this is, I suggest you to keep it as a rule, if you save some data to a file, make sure you add some comments. The file name gives some information, but if in addition to that you provide the details, what's in these files, well, you can name the columns differently and so on and so forth. It will help you a lot. So I want to go back to this new save.txt with my new file and add a couple of parameters. So first of all, I want to control the format, and the format I want to use it as just a floating point, not the exponential format, and use the 10 characters per number with 5 significant figures, and F means float. So, and this will be for all the numbers, and then I want to use a header for my text, for my data, and let's say it's new data generated by, well, sqrt. Right, let me execute that. Go to this file, and as you can see, well, it saved the data and saved the data in the format we wanted.